Hi, everyone. Welcome to interCHANGE. I'm Dan Jones. Thank you so very much for joining us once again. Lots to talk about today. Some new political polls show that both Mitt Romney and Tommy Thompson might be in some real trouble here in Wisconsin. A ruling by a Madison judge has some people wondering if Governor Walker's collective bargaining law will be thrown out. We'll talk about Milwaukee's poverty rate and whether Milwaukee is becoming the next Detroit. And we'll talk about the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel reassigning one of its most well-known columnists. All right, let me introduce everybody. You know Joel McNally, longtime newspaper columnist. Kevin Fischer, former broadcast journalist, political analyst, and oftentimes a fill-in host over on WISN Talk Radio. Denise Callaway, community affairs and public relations professional. And Gerard Randall, education consultant and local job creation expert. Rick Horowitz will be along with commentary at the end of the show. All right, the first thing we're going to talk about is politics. One poll out this week has President Obama ahead of Mitt Romney by 6 points in Wisconsin. Another has him ahead by 14 points. Those same polls show Tommy Thompson and Tammy Baldwin either tied or Baldwin ahead by 9 points. It does make you wonder if Wisconsin is going to vote heavily Democratic this time around.
I'm feeling really good. I mean, obviously, it helps that the Republican presidential ticket is headed by, I think, one of the worst candidates of all time. Even Wall Street Journal and Republican commentators like Peggy Noonan and Bill Kristol were starting to say that this week after, the revelations about the horrible things he said during this fundraiser, basically, writing off half of the country and claiming that everyone who's on a government program, doesn't take responsibility for their lives and is simply a moocher or a freeloader. Every senior citizen on Social Security or Medicare or, the troops that don't have to pay taxes while they're in combat zones, they'll be very surprised to hear what big moochers they are. I mean, he's just been a disaster, and I think Republicans, if they're honest, admit that. Some have publicly, not on this show. But the other thing is Tommy Thompson clearly, just took his win in this state for granted. Once he got the nomination, he's the great Tommy Thompson. Well, this isn't the Tommy Thompson that was governor of this state. This is the Tommy Thompson who is a millionaire as a result of, all the money he made out of lobbyists and, lobbying in Washington. Who was trying to convince, Republicans during the primary that he was much more conservative than when he, was governor of Wisconsin. And Tammy Baldwin is simply a great candidate. She's a very young, aggressive, attractive, eloquent. She's the future of politics, and Tommy Thompson is the past.
But I did hear an interview with the Marquette pollster Charles Franklin yesterday, and the reporter said, this is exactly different than it was a month ago. And his response was, it's different than it was a month ago, and it can change again in another month.
I think there's going to be more of a turnaround in both races as there's more money put in from the Romney camp and from the Thompson camp. The time between the end of the primary and up until this week, Thompson had not been on with a substantial amount of advertising time.
Why not?
That was funded out of his pocket.
Out after the primary.
He's not raising he was.
He's not raising
so now he's
well, it's starting to come in again.
They're going to be better than competitive with the ads, and so I think you're going to see in that month's time a shift. I would be worried if it were the middle of October and those were the poll results. I think polling becomes a lot more accurate as you get closer to the election, and certainly 2 weeks out. Pollsters have their reputations on the line, and they're not going to want to take samples that are not accurate samples of the voting electorate. The other thing, too, and I would agree with you, Joel, surprisingly, that Mitt Romney is not a good candidate. He's a great leader, I think has the potential to be a phenomenal leader for this country. He is not a good candidate. And that's the rub that many in the party have on him. But at the same time, if this is going to be a referendum on the performance of President Obama, all he has to do is demonstrate that he has the capacity, the will, and the desire to want to do better, and he has a track record for doing better, and he'll win.
Kevin, does money really make that much of a difference in commercials? In for Tommy Thompson? I mean, can there be anybody in Wisconsin who doesn't know everything there is to know about Tommy
Yes,
Thompson?
but let's be real about these polls. I don't buy them, and I'm not worried at all. Last month's Marquette poll had a difference in percentage of the sampling between Democrats and Republicans of 1%. This month's poll, the difference in the oversampling of Democrats was 11%. So I don't think you can take this poll very seriously. In fact, if I'm the Marquette law people, I'd be embarrassed to put it out. Are you telling me that in a month, Tommy Thompson lost 18 percentage points?
Right.
Now, he has not been on the air because he had a rough primary, okay?
Poor Tammy.
And Tammy Baldwin could just sit back and watch all the national money come in and put out these sugary sweet ads now. Well, Tommy's going to start raising money, and he's going to start putting out some ads.
About time.
And when Tammy Baldwin's record comes out, I think you're going to see a swing.
Right.
As far as Romney being ahead by 14 points, come on. All the national polling shows.
No, he's behind.
All of the national polls show this is a 47 to 47%. It's razor thin.
No, that's not what all. That is not what all the national polls show.
It's a toss-up, and I'm telling you, trust me. If
No, we don't.
If Barack Obama is ahead by 14 points in Wisconsin, then he would not be campaigning here.
Well, and of course he would, because he's taking a look at opportunities to do what he did when he won last time in Wisconsin, the last election. And that's to solidify that base, get out the vote, take a look at what you can do to help those candidates like Tammy Baldwin who are down ticket. He's not going to write off Wisconsin. Wisconsin is an important state. Part of the reason he won't write off Wisconsin is because it's Paul Ryan's home state. The Democrats are not going to do that, no matter how far ahead the polls show that they are. But let's talk about some facts here. There are a number of national polls now that show that there is within or outside of the statistical margin of error where President Obama is beating Mitt Romney in Wisconsin. It's not just the Marquette poll.
And there have been 5 polls
showing Tammy Baldwin's either ahead or tied with Governor Thompson.
Yeah.
And 2 of those 5 polls where she's shown to be ahead, she is again outside of that margin of error. You take away the margin of error, she's still ahead.
Wait till Tommy gets back on TV.
Well,
totally changes.
No, it will change, but it's not going to totally change. And here's the reason why. What we see more and more in politics is you're either dug in here or you're dug in there. What is happening, it's happened to Governor Thompson, in large part because of the type of race he had to run to get out of the primary, is that his negatives amongst independents are growing. He can't win this race, cannot win it with the negatives that he has with independents.
All right, next topic. A Madison judge has put the brakes on Governor Walker's collective bargaining laws. Some people say, oh, that's just your typical liberal activist Dane County judge making a ruling which will certainly be overturned on appeal. But others are wondering if the unions will once again get their collective bargaining powers back. And Kevin, you kind of see movement this week with a lot of the unions saying, oh, let's go back to the table or extend our contract.
Of course, they can't wait to get to the bargaining table and give their friends all kinds of sweet deals. In Dane County, they had a committee meeting within, 24 hours of the ruling, and then 2 hours later it went from committee to the full Dane County board so they could take care of their friends. And it's a shame because Act 10 has been proven to be a money saver for municipalities all across the state. It saved $1 billion statewide. But this is the MO of the liberals. They can't win at the ballot box. They can't win in the legislature. They can't win in the governor's office. So they have to cherry pick one of their own, and one person can thwart the will of the entire state.
They didn't cherry pick the judge. It was the judge who was assigned to the case. And it's not like you get to go pick a judge. I'll take this one. I'll take that one.
Well, no matter which one gets picked in Dane County,
exactly.
You know it's not going to be a conservative ruling.
Is this going to be challenged as long as Walker in his office? No matter what the ruling on this?
No, it's going to be challenged until it's able to reach, on some issues, the state Supreme Court. And there may be, based on this most recent lawsuit that was ruled on, there are some issues there that may actually kick it all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. I don't think, I would expect, just as we would expect in the case of anybody else, if we're saying that thing that we told you you couldn't do, well, you can do it now. the people are going to try to come back to the bargaining table. That's what you would certainly expect. But I think what is happening is that there is a lot of caution and in terms of waiting to see what happens before you start to figure out whether or not you have to go back and take a look at redoing what's been done to lay down some more, to go back to the bargaining table and what you can bargain on. I mean, right now, because of the ruling itself and what could be overturned in the ruling, what a court could say is legal and stays in, you don't necessarily know what the parameters that you would really be bargaining.
That's why there shouldn't be this mad scramble to renegotiate everything because of the uncertainty.
I think the scramble for the most part is unions asking to come back to the bargaining table. With few exceptions, you've really not heard of municipalities or school districts saying, okay, let's sit down and chat. Everybody is in a holding pattern. Wait to see what happens.
Is it fair to even wonder if this judge was acting politically? Because now everybody in Dane County knows the name of this judge. Like last year, maybe nobody knew who Mary Ann Sumi was. Every voter in Dane County now knows that name.
And I don't know that that'll make any difference in Dane County. At the end of the day, it's the same Supreme Court that's already ruled on Act 10, the same Supreme Court that will rule on it again, I think, with some urgency. And the decision is not going to be any different than what they ruled on earlier in the year.
Do you expect surprises?
I don't, but let me say something about what Gerard just said. And I've heard it from a lot of Republicans. We don't have to worry because we know the state Supreme Court is corrupt and rules in a conservative way no matter what the law says. I think that's awfully arrogant, first of all, and it totally misjudges what a Supreme Court is supposed to do. There's a reason why there are three branches of government, but there are particularly two branches, the legislative and the judiciary, that have to do with laws that are passed, right? And
well, the executive branch
the state Supreme Court ruled on the legislature's right to pass this law even though they violated open meeting laws, okay? That's the only thing they ruled on, was that they had violated their open meeting laws, but the state Supreme Court said, go ahead, break your laws. Okay, but this was the first judicial decision that on the actual legality of the law that was passed, on the fact that people were being denied, free speech rights, people were being denied association. You actually had the situation under this law is if you're represented by a union, you can't bargain on your wages. But if you're not represented by a union, you can go in and ask for as big a raise as you want. And the fact that people aren't treated equally under the law, that's a very important legal principle. And even this Supreme Court might have to acknowledge that there are legal questions. Let me say the other thing. The way this was passed, the fact that they passed it at night and in secret and with all these illegal meetings, that is why legal questions about this law never got asked.
All these issues that you've raised were the same issues that came before the court earlier in the year.
No, they were only
and if there had been a lapse of 2 or 3 years between this had resurfaced and an appeal showed before the court, I would say there might be a 50-50 chance of something different coming out of the court. But that's not happening. The personalities are the same. The philosophies are the same.
Very different.
And the questions were on the court's docket at the same time they ruled earlier.
All right, next topic. The U.S. Census Bureau says Milwaukee remains one of the 10 poorest big cities in America with a poverty rate of nearly 30%. Poverty being defined as income below $22,350 a year for a family of 4. 43% of the children here live in poverty. It makes you wonder if Milwaukee, Kevin, is on track to be the next Detroit. And a lot of people are wondering that.
I wouldn't go that far. Milwaukee is in some dire straits, but these Detroit comparisons, I think that's over the top. I actually have some hope for Milwaukee because historically, if you go back to the 1800s, Milwaukee helped start the first global economy, whether it was beer being put on ships that sailed out of here, or leather that found its way to Germany and on the boots of workers there. The problem is that we haven't fully recovered from the huge hit we took in manufacturing back in the 1980s. We're still suffering there. The answer is, of course, jobs and good paying jobs so that families don't have to worry about their children going to bed without meals, going to bed hungry. But that means making a climate that makes Milwaukee attractive for entrepreneurs, small businesses, investors to come in here and create the jobs or expand jobs, expand businesses, so that you can get out of this poverty situation that we find ourselves in. Jobs, and kids have to stay in school longer. They can't be dropping out. They can't be roaming the streets or sitting on porches, because that's no way out of poverty. They have to stay in school, get diplomas, get degrees, and then they have to have jobs available once they get out of school.
The numbers were just as bad last year. Do you expect that this time next year we're going to say, okay, 3 years in a row, we're still one of the poorest big cities?
It was disheartening, to say the least, that no progress has been made in reducing the amount of poverty. I think much of that can be attributed to the unemployment rate. We also still have way too many African American and Spanish-speaking males that are underemployed or unemployed in this community. And when you talk about Milwaukee being 42, 43% African American, that, in my view, is unforgivable. We have opportunities here that other communities don't have, which Kevin was alluding to. For example, we have the 4th highest concentration of engineers in the Milwaukee area in the country. That positions us in a similar place to Silicon Valley or the Triangle in North Carolina. Those companies that feed off those engineers, like Johnson Controls, Rockwell, GE, they're not likely to leave anytime soon, but there is that skills mismatch that we have to address and begin to move people into that educated pipeline that will allow them to access those jobs that would be available.
What can Milwaukee do that hasn't been done, that hasn't been tried? I mean, we've talked about this year after year.
I was just thinking that same thing, you know, that you could probably
we've got to help
part of the
young
tape.
black males get jobs. Okay, well, we talked about that 10 years ago.
I think what we need to do is we need to have a plan for what we want to do and how we want to be able to get there. You talk about Detroit and how do we not become the next Detroit? I'm thinking, how do we become the next Indianapolis? You know, where it's a city that in some ways has many of the same challenges that we have, but they developed a plan under Bill Hudnut when he was mayor to really brand the city about what it was going to be about, and that became a way to attract jobs. It's a perfect opportunity for the city to be able to do that now. Not just the city, the state plays a role in it, the M7 plays a role in it. If we don't tell people what's good about Milwaukee, why you want to come to Milwaukee, what our vision is of who we are, they don't see the opportunities. If we can't verbalize it, how do we expect other people taking a look at Milwaukee as a potential place where they might want to do business to be able to understand it
What should the
themselves?
Barrett administration do that the Norquist administration didn't try, that the Meyer administration didn't try?
Something. You know, I think there's a very simple answer to why these numbers keep coming out and don't change. And it's obvious. It should be obvious to everyone watching this show and everyone up here. Even every political leader we have does not talk about poverty, does not talk about the problem of poverty in this city or in this nation. And I'm not, this isn't a rap on Scott Walker and all those horrible things he's doing. The Republican Party doesn't talk about it, the Democratic Party doesn't talk about it. They talk about the closest they can come is to talk about the middle class. You know, we got to stand up for the middle class and protect the middle class. No one even wants to say the word poverty out loud. And when you say, what can we do we haven't done anything. We haven't targeted poverty as a problem that we're going to do something about. Every political leader, literally, you know, the last one I remember even mentioning poverty actually turned out to be a fraud. It was John Edwards out of North Carolina who started an institute against poverty, and it turned out he was a political phony from top to bottom. Before that, it was the War on Poverty by Lyndon Johnson in 1965. 64. And that was the quickest withdrawal from a war we have ever had.
All right. Next topic. The Milwaukee Journal Sentinel has reassigned one of its most well-known and controversial columnists. Eugene Kane, who for years, 18 years, has written about race relations in the African American community, has been reassigned to the schools beat. He told the Business Journal that he was offered a buyout to retire early, but he wouldn't take it. He wanted to continue reporting. Why would you reassign one of your most well-known writers to a position where he is much less visible?
Because they were trying to push him out. They were trying to get rid of him. Because white racists in this community have never liked what he has written. So they write, the ugliest letters you've ever seen about it. And to the newspaper these days, any complaint is a potential lost subscription.
But if they
and they were eager to push him out, and it is atrocious because that voice and a voice about the problems he writes about needs to be in that paper, and now it's not going to be.
But I'm sure they've been getting complaints for 18 years about him. Why now?
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, first of all, I would just want to say that we'd certainly welcome Eugene Kane to the education beat. There's lots to cover. They've downsized the numbers of reporters they've traditionally had in the education beat, and have had one person reporting on everything from preschool education to post-secondary. So to have another voice, another strong writer there, I think is something that's good for this community. But to answer your question, I think we have to take a look at not just what's happened in terms of Eugene Kane, what's happening to the other columnists they have. What role have they seen in terms of the free columnists that they have reporting information in the paper? They've seen a rise in that. At the same time, you've seen a decrease in the number of paid of regular columnists who are members of the Journal-Sentinel's newsroom. I have to wonder, if you take a look at everything that's going on, they're getting rid of their columnists, the voice of the paper, the face of the paper. They've offered and continue to offer buyouts to everyone. Is this a paper that's making itself more marketable to be sold?
That's a good point. Is this all about money?
I think so. I agree with Joel to a certain degree.
Would they rather have a $25,000 a year columnist?
But I think so. I think they're
Some of the people are doing are free.
They're trying to save money, and as several people sitting here right now know, loyalty means nothing at that company. It puzzles me, though. You have to wonder. Normally, a beat reporter strives to be a columnist because that's the prestigious job. This is in reverse. So I don't know all the behind the scenes here, but something's funny there. But I will say this. I enjoyed reading Eugene Kane, but I think he was a racial columnist. He played the race card, told Charlie Sykes on the air that he enjoyed playing the race card, and I think because he did that so often and so aggressively in your face, he actually did a disservice to racial harmony in this community.
30 seconds.
Columnists are supposed to be provocative. I have a tremendous amount of respect for Eugene Kane, both personally and professionally. I think it was disrespectful of the newspaper not to even report on the fact. I mean, it showed up in the Biz Journal before it showed up, if it's ever going to show up in the Journal-Sentinel at all. You have a huge segment of this community that frankly followed him, liked his column, and that's going to be sorely missed.
In any urban community, you have to talk about race.
Right.
And he was one of the few that did.
That did.
Okay. Lots of discussion this week about government dependency and about which people and how many of them rely on support from Washington. Well, Rick Horowitz wonders if we're really seeing the whole picture. There are all kinds of Washington support. Rick.
You know, we can all get so caught up in the latest political news that we let other news, real news, slip right by us. So let me catch up on one recent story you might have missed. This was the page 1 headline in the New York Times. Study discovers roadmap of DNA, a key to biology. And one of the subheads, genetic switches offer vital clues to how disease begins. It seems that there's lots more information in our DNA, our genetic code, than scientists had previously believed. That bits of DNA they used to think of as junk, their word for it, with absolutely no value, that this junk DNA actually contains millions of tiny switches that, well, here I'll quote, that turn out to play critical roles in controlling how cells, organs, and other tissues behave. The discovery, considered a major medical and scientific breakthrough, has enormous implications for human health, enormous implications, because many complex diseases appear to be caused by tiny changes in hundreds of gene switches. Amazing. Now, all this new research comes from a project called ENCODE, It's kind of a successor to the Human Genome Project back a decade or so, but with tons more data. 15 trillion bytes of raw data, they say. Analyzing it took the equivalent of 300 plus years of computer time. So how'd they do it? Well, the findings, it says, are the fruit of an immense federal project involving 440 scientists from 32 laboratories around the world. Let me repeat that. The fruit of an immense federal project. In fact, that was the other headline. See, large federal project. I guess they didn't have room to say immense. Since the project started back in 2003, the federal government has spent nearly $300 million on ENCODE. Now, there are certain folks, maybe you're one of them, who are against government spending for just about anything. Right now, you're saying, there they go again, spending our tax dollars, picking winners and losers. That's exactly what they're doing. The winners are health, human progress, knowledge. The losers are disease and ignorance. I'd call that a pretty good investment.
Thanks, Rick, and thank you so very much for watching. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.